All right, we're live. Morning, everybody.
Howdy, guys.
I'm Paddy.
I'm Alan.
Alan, got a special guest on this week. We don't have Paulina with us today. She's out and about at Creative Mornings this morning. But we've got Alan here. He's agreed to help us out. What do you do here, Alan? Why have you been invited to help us out with today's webinar?
I'm half of our development team. So we have two developers here at the moment, myself and Pius. Pius is not currently here at the moment, so it's fallen on me to jump in and hopefully give a wrap up of the release that went live 3 days ago now on Sunday.
Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, Sunday afternoon.
Yeah. So good to go straight to the horse's mouth, I suppose, when we're talking about release. And we've got a few questions that we'll jump in and, inquire with inside Alan's brain today to understand a bit more about the release process, exactly, what's involved in that, talking about some of the challenges, what are the considerations we need to make. Obviously talking about some of the decisions behind why we've released what we released last week. And whilst we'll showcase some of those things, we'll also have a little chat. We'll see if Alan can spill any beans on what he's currently working on and what we might expect to see in some future releases, which is exciting. Always nice to have a developer on a webinar here. It doesn't happen all the time. But before we get going today, guys, just some housekeeping. For those who are familiar with Demio, you've got that window on the right-hand side there where you can chat with us, introduce yourself, say hi, let us know who's here. And if you do have any questions throughout the webinar, just drop them into that sidebar. We'll come back to them at the end. If you have any questions specifically for Alan or myself, maybe they're not even related to this particular release, but you just want to get a direct link to us, you can certainly do that just there. So feel free to take advantage of that chat bar. Otherwise, we'll come back to those questions at the end. And in the meantime, we'll get going. So a bit of an overhead on what we're going to be chatting through today. Most of you are probably here because you would have received our release notes email. So you would already have a pretty good idea in terms of what we've released. So we're going to dig into a couple of those major items, I suppose, on that list. And there are a whole bunch of things that were involved in the release, bug fixes, improvements generally, and then some minor changes, some minor improvements that we've made. And so we'll touch on those as well, but we do want to delve into the three large, essentially, changes which have happened. Those exist around the to-do schedule. So we'll look at that, we'll talk about that. Some improvements we've made to the to-do screen, like the introduction of a right-click menu and some added functionality around there that might not necessarily be apparent at first sight. And then thirdly, we're going to talk about invoice statuses and changes we've made there and how they work with accounting software. So we'll be going through these as well. Cool. So I'm just going to grab up my screen. Okay. All right, so maybe Alan, first of all, I just dropped in here. We can see our to-do schedule. Alan, do you want to just give us a quick heads up as to what's changed here? Because it doesn't look like a whole lot's changed.
No, it doesn't look like a whole lot's changed, but this is potentially the biggest piece of work that we've released in the last, 18 months or so. This is actually a completely new schedule. So whilst it looks almost identical to before with some minor improvements, it's completely rewritten from the ground up. So like any industry, tech is probably the worst one for this, but technology moves very fast. And this was just one of those things where the tech had moved so far that we just weren't keeping up with it in this area. And because the to-do schedule is such a beast, like it is showing every single user's to-dos for, this large period of time. If you've got a big team of sort of 10, 20, 30 people, the amount of data that this is showing is immense. So this is always going to be the first area in the product that will struggle to keep up with what you're doing. So we did this full rewrite from the ground up to bring this, up to today's technologies. Today's standards.
Because I do remember a couple of years ago, I've only been working here for just over 2 years, and the first version of the schedule was released maybe 6 months into me
Mm.
having worked here,
Mm.
and that didn't even involve the to-do schedule. That was just the jobs
Yeah.
schedule. And so I think within the last 18 months, we would have released this first iteration of the to-do schedule, only to then have to rebuild it completely and essentially re-release it. But
Yeah.
one of the main things, as you were alluding to just there, is the improvement in performance that we're actually able to deliver on here, which is really awesome. In terms of how it's scrolling, it is so much more lightweight, it's quicker, and still with all the same functionality that we used to. So in terms of being able to move these tasks around, you'll notice that you can quickly do this. There's no lag at all, and you can still scan back, loading all those tasks much quicker than you were previously able to do, which is really cool. So especially with teams that do have, more people, more data to load, when you are kind of retrospectively or even, looking forward, scanning back and forth on this schedule view is going to be a much nicer experience, much more pleasant, more stable, which is cool.
Yeah.
And do you want to talk maybe a little bit about what's happening at the top here, these filters, because that's new as well?
Yeah, so this is, again, a lot of what we've done in this sprint is actually setting the groundwork for stuff that is coming up, which there's a lot of exciting things in the pipeline. These pills are one of those things that we're getting prepared for.
Is there anything you can spill beans on?
It's coming soon. Teams is a concept that we're investigating as well. We know that a lot of people who have, again, these bigger companies of 10, 20 people or so have teams that they have within there, designers and developers and copywriters and all that sort of stuff. So we're going to be looking at bringing in that concept. And again, in this schedule will then be something where you can filter down to just your design team or just your developers or whatever teams you're using. And these pills make that a lot easier. So you can do potentially just your designers and Paddy, because you know that he's going to be involved in this process at some point. So the pills are just a really cool way to manage that.
To visualize it, because it is kind of a similar concept, I suppose, in terms of that filtering. We're taking the way we already filter the jobs list over here. The way we kind of use these filters is essentially going to be that way of thinking just applied to this schedule, which is really cool, and giving some more flexibility around who we might see here is really cool.
And it's also a lot faster. For instance, in this case here, if you wanted to hide one of these users, you can either do it from a filter menu, but also when you hover over the user's name, you get this little handy set of options that you can do, one of which is X, and then that just removes the user from the view. There's other cool stuff here, so you can move them up and down, so you can do the reordering. You can collapse and expand together the users.
So I can do these individually using this one here, but also if I hold down Alt, I think I can collapse all users together or similarly expand them together.
Yeah.
So holding down Option Alt whilst doing that is going to condense that view really quickly and easily.
Yeah, so if you don't actually need to see the specific to-dos, if you just want to get a general idea of how many hours a bunch of people are available for, you can just quickly collapse everyone down. All you see is the heat map, and then you can find out when people are available or when people are overbooked.
For sure. So if I do want to see maybe what Paddy's got on, if he's so full, I can actually open that up and do that really easily as well. Awesome. So whilst we're on here, there's one question that I do want to ask, which kind of goes maybe more into the technical side of things, if you can put it in layman's terms for us, but what were some of the challenges that you did face along the way of building this new schedule? Obviously, it's no mean feat, I suppose. And maybe you can explain how long this process has taken.
Yeah, so I don't actually know exactly how long it's taken. It's around 12 weeks, I think, somewhere around there. So several months worth of work purely on this page. Obviously, a lot of the challenges we've already been through, which is things like scale and performance. There's just a lot of data here. Trying to crunch that data down into these little heat maps to give you summaries of how long people are available for. Like all of that stuff is very technically difficult. But one of the other issues we had is trying to make it seamless so that the schedule, like I said, it is actually built completely separately from the rest of Streamtime. It's a new technology, a new framework, but trying to get it work seamlessly so that you actually don't feel when you're moving from one app to the other. So to any normal person using the application, hopefully they don't even realize that this is a separate technology. And we'll slowly start rolling out this new technology to other areas of the app, which are coming up. So Yeah, that was probably one of the other big technical
Awesome.
challenges.
Well,
that
I
we
work
faced.
here and I didn't even notice that. So
Okay.
there you go. Hopefully you guys have no idea. Cool. Awesome. So let's move on to the next area, which is more focused around the to-do screen. So I'm just going to open up my to-do screen. Here.
This is my favorite one because this is the one that I was building.
Awesome. All right. Well, why don't you essentially tell us
Yeah,
what
sure.
we can do?
So I'm just going to do it from this tab because I think this is the one that we're sharing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there we go. So for me, I've always said that the way to get a really good product is to make the people who build it have to use it, and Streamtime's no different. I use Streamtime every day to log all of my development work, what I'm working on, this webinar. I'll go and create a to-do for it when I'm done. And I just notice things like that slow me down. Things like, if I want to move, I've planned some work out for today and something comes up and I need to shift all of that to, tomorrow, or I want to log a bunch of tasks, reassign some work to someone else. Things like that were just slowing me down. I'd have to constantly click into the to-do, open the modal, reassign it to someone else, things like that. So what we've brought in is a right-click menu. Oops.
You might actually need to hold down control there.
Hold down
Sorry,
control.
I don't have
Paddy's
that.
computers. So I have in mine. I have right-click on mine. Yeah, it's this right-click menu. So to avoid having to constantly keep opening that modal, changing something and saving it, this is what we've come up with. So these are a bunch of the things that we think people do a lot. There are obviously more in here that we want to add, but this is where we got up to at the moment. Reassigning is a big one for me. I'm constantly having to shift something off to someone else. It's really easy now. All you do, reassign, and then bang, send it off to someone else, and that's it. That task has now been reassigned.
So let's go to Andy's to-do screen and let's just make sure we can see that one having popped up there. Annual leave. Andy's going on my holiday now.
Yep. We
enjoy, Andy.
Definitely want to bring that one back.
Yeah.
Don't want to give Andy too much leave. Yeah, so reassigning is one of them. Another one is duplicating. Often as part of doing one bit of work, something else will pop up that I need to now do. So I'll often duplicate that task and maybe add some notes to the duplicated task or something along those lines.
I can't remember who it was. Someone in here, it might have been you, it might have been someone else, but they suggested this great workflow where, for example, I'm working with Alan on a particular project and maybe we've just been in a meeting and I've already got a task created for it and then Alan needs to work on that as well. So let's say maybe even, for example, this three visual identity concepts that need to get done. What I can do to get Alan to help me out on this is duplicate it. And as you can see, that duplicate just pops right on top. But then I can actually just reassign it to Alan so that he has that, well, you're not actually in here, but let's say Andy in this instance, so that Andy knows instantly he's got that task on his to-do screen. That's a really easy way for me to actually create a task for Andy if we're both working on the same thing together on a particular day.
Yeah, for sure.
So using a couple of those different new pieces of functionality together.
And there is actually an even more advanced version of that workflow. So log and delete, they're pretty standard. Everyone understands that. We have also brought in the concept of multi-selecting. So as you can see here, these to-dos that I'm selecting are turning green. There's two ways to do it. One of which is to use on a Mac the Command key, and that will let me select to-dos from anywhere on the screen. The other option is to use the Shift key, and then that will select everything on that day. So if I select the first task and then Shift click the last task, that'll select everything on the day. That's an even more powerful way where you can actually plan out an entire day for myself, duplicate it, and then straight away, oops, I've gotten caught out by the control key, straight away reassign that off to Andy. And now my entire day of to-dos, including any notes that I've added, the durations, everything, bang, assigned to a second person.
Ready for him to get going.
Ready for them to get going as well. So it's a really fast way to sort of plan out days for multiple people straight from your to-do screen.
It's cool. One other thing that is also pretty subtle in here, one other little change. Not sure if anyone's picked up on this yet, but surprisingly, lots of people had asked for this. I didn't think it would be such a big issue, and I think that's the fact that lots of people are asking this is a bit of a testament to the way different people run their jobs through Streamtime, running their businesses, the different types of businesses that can use Streamtime is this little option menu.
Yes.
And you might be like, what do you mean? What's the big deal with the option menu?
Yeah, this
What is the
was
big deal with the option
this
menu?
was a huge, like an internal debate that has been had for a long time. Is what is the most important piece of information out of these three things: the job, the item, or notes that you've added to the task? And I don't think that there is a right answer.
No.
Everybody has their own way of needing to see this information. So some people just they handle lots of small jobs. The job is the most important thing to see.
Yeah.
Some people have one job with lots of items. The item is the most important thing. Then some people work on jobs where every item is called artwork.
It's the same thing.
In which case, maybe the notes is the most important thing. So you'll create an item called artwork and
they
then
might-
put notes on it.
They might not even want to see the name of the
Might not
item
even
because
care, yeah.
it's just taking up space and it's
Yeah.
confusing.
For sure. So we put this in, which is just you can choose. So we've got our own default version here, but then hey, if you guys think that the job name is the most important thing, feel free to chuck it at the top. Items are your thing, whatever, or even just tick them off if you just don't even care about that at all. In this case here, bang, there's your job name, done.
And that is set up on a per user basis. So however you decide you like to see that information hierarchy on your to-dos, that's entirely up to you. Once you have that setting set for yourself in the system, you'll see all to-dos across Streamtime with that hierarchy. So if I wanted to jump in and look at Andy's to-do screen, I'm going to see just the job names there, whereas Andy's going to see whatever he's got set up. So I'm not making any impacts on anyone else's. People won't get confused if they come in there and the information doesn't translate in a way that they would expect. It's retained to each user, which is cool.
Yeah.
Another good one. I like that. So invoice statuses.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, just on that right-click menu and shift clicking.
Sorry about that.
Like I'm saying, a lot of what we've done is groundwork. This one is no different. This right-click menu, shift clicking, command clicking is all going to eventually go into the schedule because obviously people at schedule need this power of being able to quickly assign and duplicate and whatnot. So yeah, this is only the beginning. It will go over into the schedule eventually.
And there is one other piece of functionality that kind of ties in between that importance of the schedule and the to-do screen. We're trying to make that relationship a bit more robust, a bit more even accountable, I suppose. One thing we haven't shown is the introduction of the audit trail on those tasks when they're created. So for example, I can see that Danielle's got nothing booked on for Friday right now, and I might need her to spend a full day doing this particular task, working on this logo for Channel 7, doing some research. So I can save that. And Danielle's got this task here, and that's great. But Danielle didn't create that task. I did. And so Danielle might come into her to-do screen and wonder why she's got that task created for Friday. It's new. She didn't put it there. What's going on?
I have this all the time. I'll always come in and there's something on my to-do screen and I'll need to try and just ask around as to who put it there.
Again, another case of that,
Yes, if you use it, you will find the pain points very quickly. And so we added this little audit trail. It might not look like much, but it's just down here. Who created and who has last modified the to-do. So in this case here, we can just see it was Patty, right now, but someone might move that. They might put something else on your Friday and move this until next week, in which case you need to know why it's been moved to a different day.
Certainly,
yeah. Or someone's reassigned it to a different person. Again, all of that will show up there.
And it goes both ways. When there's work being scheduled for you, it's important to know when was this task scheduled, who scheduled it for me. But even going the other way. So say I've scheduled that task for Danielle, and perhaps she moves it, or perhaps someone else in the schedule maybe even accidentally moves it. I might notice that that's been moved to next week, and I want to understand why. So I can then go look at this audit trail, see who's made that change, and then go and find out why that's the case. Perhaps our deadline's shifted that I might not have heard about. So just improving accountability within those to-dos there too. Cool. Now back to the invoices. Sorry, jumped the gun on that one. So really quickly, because this one is probably it's useful, it's important, but probably to a very niche group of people.
Yeah. So like you guys may know, in Streamtime, we have our little invoice statuses. They are draft, awaiting payment, and paid.
Yeah, let's just draft,
Or not there.
awaiting payment, paid.
Yep. And a credit note if that happens to be what you're using. We used to have an invoice status called external, where anytime you sent an invoice to your accounting package, your QuickBooks or MYOB, the status would just change to external. And in order to figure out like any details of that invoice, you would have to click that little black question mark next to the name external, and that would then go and fetch from your accounting package what the status is in your accounting package. What we've done now is we've gotten rid of that status called external because it doesn't really help anyone. And we take whatever the status is of your accounting package and we update that in Streamtime. So if you receipt payments in your accounting package, in Streamtime, you will see that the invoice will be awaiting paid. The next time you fetch the status from your accounting package, that invoice may update from awaiting payment to paid. Now, the power of that is you can then actually use Streamtime to report on your invoices that are awaiting payment, your invoices that have been paid in a given month. It lets you create these segments and filters to actually report on your financials straight from Streamtime.
In one place, right?
In one place, yep.
And I think the difference there is, perhaps you are marking some as paid in Streamtime, perhaps not, or it depends on lots of different people send invoices to their accounting packages at completely different points in their workflow. Some prefer to send them from Streamtime, even reconcile them from Streamtime, then send them across. Others prefer to get them across as soon as the draft is created and have the invoices managed from that place. But there might be other people in the business who don't spend so much time in Xero, for example, and still want to be able to see important financial information. And by essentially streamlining those statuses with the accounting systems, with the statuses that we have in Streamtime, and replacing what this used to say, which was sent to Xero as paid, allows us to review all of those paid invoices together at the same time. And you'll see that when we filter to look at our paid invoices, we're seeing those Xero paid invoices and our Streamtime paid invoices in one list together. There's no difference between the two, where previously you would have seen them in two different lists. Or you could have combined them perhaps to see them together. But essentially what we're doing is simplifying that process and making it a lot clearer and easier to do. And still, you'll know when one was paid in Xero versus just Streamtime. We surface this little logo here. Cool. So we're getting towards the end of our 30 minutes, but there were a bunch of other smaller things that we'll just mention were involved in the release. You guys can go and find these yourselves. They're more lightweight pieces of functionality or improvements. Things like the addition of a date of quote approval column in the quote list. So if you want to review all the quotes that have been approved this month, helps gauge forecasting and cash flow. The ability to hide line item totals on an invoice. Why might that be useful, do you think?
We did hear this one a fair bit. I think it was just around visibility to your clients. So yeah, you may still want to itemize everything very specifically when you send that to your accounting package. So you still want your revenue account codes and everything to track exactly how much was sold for each line item. But you don't need to necessarily expose that information to your customer. You just want to give your customer a bill with all of the items on it and then just a single total dollar figure down the bottom. So again, that's a really simple way to just hide that information from your customer, but still retain it so that it gets sent to your accounting package for reporting reasons.
And especially for people that might be doing this, in other places, perhaps they're building their own invoices. It essentially just allows them now to do this in Streamtime. So removing those stopgaps there. And then one other thing that is worth mentioning as well, also around the schedule, definitely had the most attention within this release, is the introduction of a view mode. So essentially, kind of went quietly, that one. I almost I was like, essentially, and we do hear this one quite a bit, people want to be able to have team members access the schedule, see what's happening, but not necessarily make changes. And I think that also came in with different people being in different levels of the business and just it being important to be able to see what's happening, but permitting the changing of tasks, the editing, particularly when there wasn't that audit trail as well, which we've just released.
Yeah.
Some people did find that problematic, particularly within larger teams where something small might change and it would be like finding a needle in a haystack and trying to understand why that's happened, who's made that change. But essentially within each team member now, we've added an option around access privileges, which is view schedule or edit schedule. So very self-explanatory, but one is permitting a reader-only approach to the schedule, allowing team members to jump in and see what's happening without making changes.
And that also applies to the little toggle from the to-do screen itself,
Cool.
which was what we were using a minute ago to switch between multiple users. Same thing. You can give someone view mode so that they can edit their own to-do screen, but they can only jump across and see what other people are working on.
Okay.
Which again is really good for those times where you need the collaboration between the teams, so you know when someone's free or when someone's working on something, but you don't necessarily want them to be able to go in and throw out all of your hard planned tasks. So, yeah.
Can't imagine why anyone would want to be able to do that in the first place, but I suppose people continue to surprise you. Hey?
Yes, they
Yeah.
really do.
Cool. Well, we've got a few minutes left, and I do have a couple of wrap-up questions for you, Alan, while I've got you.
Yes.
3 minutes, then you can get back to work. What are the things to consider when releasing a new update? For example, existing behaviors?
Yeah, there's
timing?
it's really difficult because we try to release things that obviously are going to be an improvement for all of our users, but sometimes people have very specific ways of doing things that just don't necessarily fit with how other people use it. So there's this constant struggle to make something that works for everybody, but you know that sometimes there are going to be like pain points with certain people as to how they're using things. So that's always a big consideration for when releasing stuff. The other thing is from a technical point of view, one of the smallest things that were released in this release was just that little audit trail on the to-do of who created it and who last modified it. It was very simple to write. It didn't take particularly long, but we needed that to work historically for all data that had been put into Streamtime forever, which is a lot of data.
How many to-dos?
Millions.
I heard this statistic the other day.
There's over 3.5 million to-dos just from memory. There's a lot in there. Trying to just get all that data ready before the upgrade was days worth of work. Streamtime was running flat out for over 3 days, just trying to pre-fill all that data last week in preparation for the upgrade on Sunday. So there's limitations on all sides: technical, usability, design. It's a lot goes into a release like Sundays.
Totally. And I think, what about the timing? Like, obviously we chose to release on a Sunday. Typically we would try and release, I think, on a weekday. We would just do it early in the morning, pick hours where people won't be in the office. So what was different this time?
Yeah, so Tuesday to Thursday tends to be our sweet spot for releasing upgrades because it gives us a day beforehand to make sure everything's ready, a day afterwards to keep an eye on things, make sure everything's running smoothly. And like you said, we'll do it early in the morning, sort of 7 o'clock our time, because that's when a few people are using it. But because this release was such a big release, there was potentially a lot of, data that had to be prepared beforehand and everything like that. We decided to do it on a Sunday because that's when we know that definitely only the most hardcore of schedulers and to-doers are in the system. So we did it Sunday, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, jumped online, got it sorted. Again, it gave us that peace of mind that if something went wrong, we'd have time to fix it afterwards and make sure everything was running how it was. So weekends just gives us a little bit more leeway with that.
Cool. And I do want to ask, what is in store for the next release, or what are you currently working on at least?
Yeah, so we've got some cool stuff. Again, lots of groundwork went through this sprint. Next sprint, one of the cool things that we're working on is smarter invoicing. So we know at the moment, you just hit that create invoice button and bang, gives you an entire invoice. what we're working on is giving you a lot more choice around that. So being able to only invoice certain line items or certain expenses, being able to do percentage invoices, so installments. We know that that's a big one. People write up a job plan or get a quote approved and then need to do a 50% upfront installment and then bill the remaining 50% afterwards, or maybe even more complicated versions than that. Maybe you only bill certain items on the invoice. I know that's a big one that architects often mention to us because they have such long-running jobs. They need to be very specific on line item percentage invoices. So there is a very cool wizard coming for invoicing. That's a good one.
And again, that's something where it's a balance between permitting flexibility but also having structure. We don't want to just give people a blank slate to say do whatever you want, but also we want people to be able to do whatever they're used to be able to doing or need to be able to do. So
and our design team does a good job of that. We have Christian and Sarah, which I'm sure you've seen on the webinar before, but there's been a lot of research that's gone into it, a lot of pre-design, user testing, all that sort of stuff. We've then built it. We've gone through another round of user testing of what we've actually built and was ready to go. And we're now going through a polishing stage of, taking that user feedback and then working it back into the product. So there is a lot of stages that go through in order to get to a release.
Awesome.
And there's one other cool area that we're working on, which is the job timeline. So again, a lot of people constantly asking for similar sorts of things. Was a Gantt chart or a Gantt style view of the job that they can then share with their client. So Patty's just trying to pull up.
I'm going to change my window here, everybody. And I've just dropped this link into the chat bar as well. This is our roadmap. So if you haven't already checked out our roadmap, take a look there. This is currently what we're looking at. And it is this notion of a project timeline. As you can see, this is going to be sitting at the top of what we know as the job page. We're going to have these different tabs that you could navigate between and see different information about the job there. So currently you'd be looking at health or that summary.
Your little burn up graph and quoted versus planned, etc.
Exactly. And now we've got the timeline. So what are we looking at here? Can you just sum it up quickly?
So there's a few things on there's actually a lot on this page that's changed. I'll just go quickly through. The first one is phases, being able to group your job items together. So we know that sometimes you have a job with 15, 20 items on it, and it gets a bit unwieldy. This is the way we can easily create phases. You can see in this one, we've got the discovery phase with 2 items against it, design phase, and so on and so forth. So that's one of the first big changes. And then we take all of that information and we bring it up into this Gantt chart. And you can see that there's a design phase there with the 2 items, which are in yellow. Then there's the design phase and so on and so forth. We're also toying with the idea of dependencies. So being able to actually say this task needs to be finished before this task can start, so on and so forth, as well as milestones on the job. You may have a big client meeting, or maybe there's
an invoice that needs to go out on a certain day.
Maybe there's a big seminar that you need to have things prepared for. So again, it's another way of just creating these little flags on a job saying, at this date here, something big needs to be done, and you can just put a few little notes against it. And it's just another way of visualizing that job.
And that will obviously link directly to your schedule. So the dates that you're painting in here will obviously correlate there. There'll be a reflection. You're just getting a nicer view of what's happening on the job here. And what about this being something that you could share with your client?
So again, another big one. People are always wanting to write up a timeline, then share it with the client. We've got a few ideas for how we're going to do that, one of which is just being able to print this straight as a PDF. Also, similar to the way quotes and invoices work, potentially being able to send an email to your client with a link in it, and then that link is a live view of whatever you've planned in the job. So if you want to give them a constantly updating progress of how you're going, that's the way to do it. Anytime they look at it, you moving stuff around in here, they'll see it straight away on their side. So a few different ways of sharing with the client and getting them involved with job planning.
Awesome. Hey, thanks so much, Alan, for jumping in.
No drama.
That was
Happy
really
to help.
helpful. Thanks everybody for hanging out. We went a little bit longer, 5 minutes, but seems like most of you were keen to check it out. Lou, glad to see that you're into the timeline feature. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.